It was talking about.
Okay.
Okay.
President,
Majority Leader.
is the Senate now on a quorum call?
The Senate is in a quorum call.
I ask unanimous consent that that be terminated.
Without objection, so ordered.
I withdraw my pending motion to proceed, and
The motion is withdrawn.
I move to proceed to calendar number 442, S3364.
The clerk will report.
Motion to proceed to calendar number 442, S3364, a bill to provide an incentive for businesses to bring jobs back to America.
Mr. President, I have a cloture motion at the desk in reference to this legislation.
The clerk will report the cloture motion.
Cloture motion, we, the undersigned senators, in accordance with the provisions of Rule 22 of the Standing Rules of the Senate, hereby move to bring to a close the debate on the motion to proceed to calendar number 442, S3364, a bill to provide an incentive for businesses to bring jobs back to America, signed by 17 senators as follows: Reed of Nevada, Stabenow, Whitehouse, Franken, Durbin, Brown of Ohio, Blumenthal, Merkley, Coons, Casey, Cardin, Shaheen, Gillibrand, Schumer, Reed of Rhode Island, Mikulski, Rockefeller.
Mr. President, I ask unanimous consent the mandatory quorum required under Rule 22 be waived.
Without objection, so ordered.
Mr. President, once again, I'm disappointed, as I think most people in this country are, on an issue as timely as this, outsourcing jobs, that we once again are being stymied in moving to that legislation. We're going to have a vote on this. The rules are I can't have a vote on this. We can't have a vote on this till 2 days go by, so that's a vote on Thursday. And if cloture is invoked on that, then we're only on the bill. And then to get off of it, take another series of days. I mean, to get final action on this is going to take a week. That's so unfortunate that we have to go through this. And we've gone through this so many times. And there's, I repeat, not an issue more timely than this. Outsourcing jobs, whether it's the Olympic uniforms or the many other jobs that have been lost around this country. The American people are tired of this. And I think it's unfortunate the Republicans are stopping us from being able to start legislating on this bill.
Mr. President.
Senator from Michigan.
Thank you, Mr. President. I rise today to urge my colleagues to support the motion we have before us to begin consideration of my bill, the Bring Jobs Home Act. I want to thank our leader for making this a priority and thank the President of the United States for also making this a priority as we move forward. And let me first start on process to say it is true, of course, as the leader indicated, we could be simply on this bill and working to complete it and to pass it, but unfortunately, as happens on everything now, when the leader attempts to move to a bill, there is an objection to do that. When there is, it puts us into a situation where we have to spend several days trying to overcome a potential filibuster to be able to move to the bill. So that's process-wise where we are. But from a substance standpoint, it is absolutely critical that we move to this bill and that we pass it. The Great Recession and the financial collapse of 2008 were absolutely devastating to our economy. We know that during that time, 8 million Americans lost their jobs. 8 million Americans. Many, many still struggling to get out of their own deficit hole because of what happened. These are people who've worked all their lives and played by the rules only to have the rug pulled out from under them. Many of these people were folks who worked in manufacturing, and many in my great state of Michigan. We are so proud that we make things in Michigan. And we don't have a middle class, we don't have an economy unless we make things. And that's what we do in Michigan. And for decades, this has been the foundation of our economy. And it frankly created the middle class of this country. And we're proud that it started in Michigan with the beginning of the automobile industry. It's no coincidence that as those jobs have disappeared over the decades, that the middle class has begun to disappear as well, and families are feeling in more and more difficult situations personally as a result of that. Those jobs have been the driving force of our economy for decades, as I indicated. Those jobs are the jobs that have allowed the greatest generation to build the greatest economy in the world, the greatest economy we've ever seen. And those jobs led to tree-lined streets with at least one car in every driveway and the freedom to raise a family and send them to college and maybe have the cottage up north or be able to take family on vacation and have the American dream. Today, in fact, that dream is in jeopardy, and every American family knows that. But it doesn't have to be that way. In the last decade, companies shipped 2.4 million jobs overseas. 2.4 million jobs were shipped overseas. And to add insult to injury, American taxpayers were asked to help foot the bill. You know, it's amazing when I explain that to folks in Michigan. They say, "You've got to be kidding," or they say other things that I can't repeat on the floor of the United States Senate. Just imagine if you are one of those workers in Michigan or in Virginia or in Ohio or in Wisconsin or anywhere in this country who maybe was forced to train your overseas replacement before you were laid off. Imagine what your reaction would be. More colorful than I've been able to state here. When an American worker is asked to subsidize the moving expenses, as they do today under current tax policy, the moving expenses and costs so their own job can be shipped overseas, there is something seriously wrong with our tax code and with our priorities. It does not have to be that way. In fact, we can change that. We can change that this week on the floor of the Senate by passing the Bring Jobs Home Act and sending it to the House and then sending it to the President, where I know he will enthusiastically and immediately sign it. Instead of rewarding companies for shipping jobs overseas, we want to reward companies for bringing jobs home. That's the whole point of this bill. We stopped the tax deduction for moving expenses related to moving jobs overseas. That's what this bill does. Right now, you can deduct those expenses as part of your business expenses. We say no more. Secondly, we say, however, if you want to come home, we'll happily give you that deduction for the cost of moving back to the United States, and we will add an additional 20% tax credit for those costs of bringing jobs back to the United States. That's what we are doing in the Bring Jobs Home Act. This is just common sense. Unfortunately, not that common these days. But it is common sense, and it's good economic sense as well, Mr. President. It is so important that we pass this bill. You know, we talk about tax reform, we talk about having a lot of tax loopholes. This is one we can eliminate right now, together, on a bipartisan basis. Let's start here. Number one loophole, we'll close it. Number one priority, jobs in America. Now, I know some of my colleagues don't believe that these jobs are ever coming back. I hear that all the time. We in Michigan have been seeing that same defeatist argument for 20 years. But in fact, that's not true. And one of the things that I'm proudest of in the last 3.5 years is that we have refocused on advanced manufacturing, making things in America, in this country. We have a lot more to do, but we have, in fact, refocused on jobs here at home. And we are seeing, because of that, a whole range of policies, whether it's the Advanced Manufacturing Tax Cut I authored and the Recovery Act that allows a 30% write-off for clean energy, manufacturing jobs, or whether it's the retooling loans that we put in place to be able to help retool plants, to be able to modernize them with advanced manufacturing that's bringing jobs back. We have put in place some initial things that are making a difference. And we are now seeing every month that manufacturing is having an uptick. It's It's been really one of the only areas that has seen pretty much every month we've begun to see a slow return. We're beginning to see some of these jobs come back as a result of that. Our companies are doing the calculations, finding out that bringing jobs home makes good business sense. And it's time our tax code stopped standing in the way and actually caught up with what many businesses are doing. Ford Motor Company brought jobs back from Mexico to support advanced vehicle manufacturing at their newly retooled Wayne assembly plant in Wayne, Michigan. Chrysler is growing and expanding their operations here in the United States, investing 95%, I believe, is the last number I heard of their investments are being done in America, and we're proud to have them investing in Detroit and in Michigan. And last week we saw reports that GM is about to go on, quote, a hiring binge, and I love this. I love anything called a hiring binge, as they bring almost all of their information technology needs back in-house into America. We have a great company in Detroit, actually from New Jersey, now in Detroit, Galaxy Solutions, who has an outsourced to Detroit effort going on to bring IT jobs back from places like India and Brazil and China. And they have on the side of one of our largest buildings, Mr. President, this great sign that says outsource to Detroit. We're going to outsource somewhere. Let's outsource to our American cities. And we love the fact that they are part of the effort to rebuild and refocus on Detroit. We have companies that want to invest in America. We have stories about GE coming back. We have stories in every state of companies that are bringing jobs back to America. We have men and women who want to work. We have companies that are looking at bringing jobs back, and CNBC called it the stuff that dreams are made of. I think that going forward, the great economic resurgence for us is involved in advanced manufacturing, making things in America, and bringing our jobs back to America, and it is more than time. It's what our workers are dreaming of, and we are proud in Michigan of our workforce, these folks that know how to work, they want to work, they work hard every day, and I have to say that efforts like Outsource to Detroit are giving them a new chance to do that, as well as the other efforts that are going on around Michigan. There are so many opportunities right here in America. We've got the great new ideas. We've got the ingenuity, the innovation. We have to make sure we have the right policies to make it happen, that we aren't doing anything in our tax code that encourages jobs to go overseas, that we do everything possible to support efforts to bring them back, and then to reinvest and to expand upon research, development, innovation, retooling the plants that we have, reinvesting in communities, reinvesting in our cities, and focusing on a strategy of American jobs. That's what everyone wants us to be doing. And there's a great place to start, and that is with our tax code, so that it catches up with what leading-edge business leaders already know. American businesses, American workers can compete with anybody in the world if we have a level playing field and we give them a chance to do it. This is really a moment, I believe, for us to indicate very strongly to everybody in the country that we get it and that we're not going to allow the tax code to continue to create a situation where if someone wants to close up shop and move overseas, they get a tax write-off as a result of that. That makes absolutely no sense. You know, I can't imagine any other country in the world allowing that to happen. When I think about places like China, where, Madam President, at this point, they say, come on over, we'll build the plant for you. Forget about a retooling loan, we'll build the plant for you. Of course, then we'll steal your patent, and there's a whole range of other challenges, but come on over, and we will build the plant for you. The last numbers I saw showed that China was spending $288 million a day, it's probably more now, on clean energy policies and manufacturing and new cutting-edge efforts to try to compete and beat us in an area that we should own. You know, between our universities and our businesses and our great workforce, we ought to completely own these technologies. Now, I'm very proud to say that Michigan is now #1 in new clean energy patents. And we were proud to open last Friday the first U.S. patent office outside of Washington, D.C. in Detroit, Michigan as a result of that. And there are great ideas happening all over this country right now. Innovators, frankly, people who have lost their jobs and are now back in their garage or their basement or the extra bedroom with new ideas. We want to create businesses, support their creation of businesses by incentivizing them, not having a tax code that incentivizes somebody to move overseas. So this legislation, I think, is pretty simple, Madam President. It's very simple. It's about bringing jobs home to America, and it's very simple. We're going to stop writing off the cost, allowing that business to be subsidized by all of us, including the people they lay off, in order to move overseas. And instead, we're going to say, no, you move overseas, you're on your own. But if you want to come back, we're happy to allow you a business deduction for those moving expenses, and we will add another 20% towards the cost of your expenses on top of it. That's what we should be doing. That's smart tax policy. It's common sense. It's one step in a series of things that we need to do in order to be able to bring jobs home and make things in America again. And I hope that we will see an overwhelmingly positive bipartisan vote on this bill. It would send a wonderful message that we can work together. You know, we worked together not long ago to pass a farm bill with a strong bipartisan vote because we know we need to grow things in America. And we need to make things and grow things. That's how you have an economy. That's how we have a middle class in this country. And we came together, and I'm very appreciative of everyone coming together, working with Senator Roberts and I to be able to get that done. This is another opportunity, another way for us to come together and say, we get it, we understand what's going on in the country, and let's work together and let's get the job done. So I strongly urge colleagues to come together and to pass the Bring Jobs Home Act. Thank you, Madam President. Madam President, I suggest the absence of a quorum.
Clerk will call the roll.
Mr. O'Connor.
Senator from North Dakota.
I ask that the quorum call be suspended.
Without objection.
I rise today to speak on the need for comprehensive pro-growth tax reform. 1 week ago, Monday, President Obama proposed to raise taxes on over 1 million small businesses in this country. Even though he has said in the past that we cannot raise taxes in a recession and that higher taxes will hurt our economy and hurt job creation, he proposed raising taxes on more than 1 million small businesses across this country. So last week I came to the floor to talk about why that is not the right approach and to discuss the approach that we should take, the right approach. I pointed out that his approach, the administration's approach, has made our economy worse since he has taken office. Now, I hear the facts speak for themselves. Let's go through some of those facts. Today, we have 8.2% unemployment. We've had over 8% unemployment for 41 straight weeks. We have 13 million people who are out of work, more than 13 million people who are looking for work, and another 10 million people who are underemployed. That's 23 million people who are either unemployed or underemployed. Middle-class income. Middle-class income has declined from an average of $55,000 down to $50,000 since the president took office. Food stamps. Food stamp usage is up. 32 million food stamp recipients at the beginning of the Obama administration. Today, 46 million recipients. So we've gone from 32 million people on food stamps to 46 million people on food stamps. Home values. Home values have dropped from an average of about $169,000 to an average of about $148,000. Economic growth. GDP growth is the weakest for any recovery since World War II. In the last quarter, the rate of growth was 1.9% over the prior quarter. Job creation. June's numbers, 82,000 jobs created in the month of June. We need 150,000 jobs gain each month just to keep up with population growth and to reduce the unemployment rolls. So those are some of the statistics. But when I spoke on the floor last week, I also read a letter from one of my constituents back home, a small business owner. He owns an Ace Hardware store. And in his letter, he stated very clearly and very eloquently that the president's approach and his approach with small business is hurting our economy. And I'm not going to read the full letter, but I do want to read one of the lines, a couple of the lines in his letter. In the letter, he states, the president's programs not only limit my company's potential to grow, but they destroy any incentive to work and hire more people. I just don't know if he doesn't understand what he's doing or he just doesn't care. I'm taking that right out of a small business person's letter. So keep that last line in mind for just a minute. Quote, I just don't know if he, President Obama, doesn't understand what he's doing or just doesn't care, end quote. And I reference that because the president gave a speech last Friday. It was in Roanoke, Virginia. And in his speech, he followed up on his plan to raise taxes on small businesses. He followed up with the following, and I'm going to read right from the president's speech because I think it gives insight as to his view of small business and how our economy works. So this is right out of his speech. There are a lot of wealthy, successful Americans who agree with me because they want to give something back. They know they didn't. Look, if you've been successful, you didn't get there on your own. You didn't get there on your own. I'm always struck by people who think, well, it must be because I was just so smart. There are a lot of smart people out there. It must be because I work harder than everybody else. Let me tell you something. There are a whole bunch of hardworking people out there. Again, this is from the president's speech, and I'm quoting directly. He goes on. If you were successful, somebody along the line gave you some help. There was a great teacher somewhere in your life. Somebody helped to create this unbelievable American system that we have that allowed you to thrive. Somebody invested in roads and bridges. If you've got a business, you didn't build that. Somebody else made that happen. The Internet didn't get invented on its own. Government research created the Internet so that all the companies could make money off the Internet, end quote. So that's right out of the President's speech in Roanoke, Virginia, last Friday. I think these comments provide real insight into President Obama's view of our economy and the role of small business in our economy. He says that we've all had help in our lives, and that's certainly true. No question. I don't think anyone disputes that. But he makes clear that he believes government, not small business, is the driver of our economy. He says that it's government that paves our roads. It's government that invented the Internet. In essence, it's government that made successful people successful, and government that makes our economy go. And that's just not right. It's small business that makes our economy go. It's small business that made our economy the envy of the world. It's small businesses that serve as the backbone of our economy, that employ our people, that generate tax revenue to build our roads, that create innovation like the Internet, and that provides Americans with the highest standard of living in the world. Small business is the engine that drives our economy, and we need to get it going. And you don't do that by raising taxes and growing government. Clearly, that's not the way to go. But the President says, well, everyone needs to pay their fair share. Well, again, of course everyone needs to pay their fair share. But the way to ensure that that gets accomplished is with pro-growth tax reform, comprehensive pro-growth tax reform and closing loopholes. Let's extend the current tax rates for 1 year. And let's set up a process to pass comprehensive pro-growth tax reform that lowers rates, that closes loopholes, that's fair, that's simpler, and that will generate revenue to reduce our deficit and our debt through economic growth rather than through higher taxes. The reality is that's the only way to go, along with reducing government spending that will get our debt and our deficit under control and that will get our people back to work. To be successful, this effort needs to be bipartisan, and the clock is ticking. So let's get started. Let's give small business in this country the legal, tax, and regulatory certainty to encourage private investment and innovation. That's the American way. That's the real American success story. We can do it, and we need to make it happen now. Thank you, Madam President, and I yield the floor.
The clerk will call the roll. Mr. Kaka.
Madam President,
Senator from Iowa.
I suggest I ask the calling of the quorum be suspended.
Without objection.
Madam President, I come to the floor to address my colleagues about a federal agency that has forgotten that this federal agency is supposed to be working for the American people. This is an agency that has gotten really too big for its britches. Some of its officials have forgotten who pay their salary. The Food and Drug Administration is supposed to protect the American people, except lately. The only thing that the FDA bureaucrats seem to have any interest in is protecting themselves. According to whistleblowers and published reports in the Washington Post and the New York Times, the agency in charge of safeguarding the American public and providing for the public safety has trampled on the privacy of its very own employees. The FDA mounted an aggressive campaign against employees who would dare to question its actions and created what the New York Times termed an enemies list of people it considered dangerous. You know, it kind of reminds you of President Nixon and the IRS going after enemies. The Food and Drug Administration has been spying on this enemies list. The FDA has been spying on the personal emails of these employees and everybody that these employees contacted. That includes their protected communications even with those of us in Congress. We would not have known the extent of the spying if internal FDA documents about it had not been released on the Internet, apparently just by accident. We would not have known how the FDA intentionally targeted and captured confidential personal emails between the whistleblowers, their lawyers, and those of us in Congress. In these internal documents, the FDA has never wanted the public to see. It referred to whistleblowers as, quote unquote, collaborators. FDA refers to congressional staff as ancillary actors. FDA refers to newspaper reporters as media outlet actors. These memos make the FDA sound more like the East German Stasi than a consumer protection agency in a free country. At the beginning of Commissioner Hamburg's term, she said whistleblowers expose critical issues within the FDA. That seems to be a very approving comment. She vowed to create a culture that values whistleblowers. That appears to be a very approving statement. In fact, in 2009 she said, and I want to quote, "I think whistleblowers serve an important role," end of quote. I wanted to believe Commissioner Hamburg when she testified before the Senate committee during her confirmation. I wanted to believe her when she said she would protect whistleblowers at the Food and Drug Administration. However, the facts now appear very, very different. In this case, the FDA invaded the privacy of multiple whistleblowers. It hacked into the private email accounts and used sophisticated keystroke logging software to monitor the entire and every move online. When an FDA supervisor was placed under oath in the course of an equal employment opportunity complaint, that employee, that supervisor, testified that the FDA was conducting, quote unquote, routine security monitoring. That is entirely false. This monitoring was anything but routine. It targeted specifically at 5 whistleblowers. It intentionally captured their private email to attorneys, to members of Congress, and to the Office of Special Counsel. The internal documents showed that this was a unique, highly sophisticated, and highly specialized operation. According to the Office of Inspector General, the Food and Drug Administration had no evidence of any criminal wrongdoing by these whistleblowers. This massive campaign of spying was not just an invasion of privacy. It was specifically designed to intercept communications that are protected by law. The Office of Special Counsel, you know, is an agency created by Congress to receive whistleblower complaints and to protect whistleblowers from retaliation. The law protects communications with the special counsel as a way to encourage whistleblowers to report waste, fraud, abuse, mismanagement, and threats to the public safety, and to do that reporting without fear of retaliation. The FDA knew that contacts between whistleblowers and the Office of Special Counsel are privileged and confidential. But the James Bond wannabes at the FDA just didn't seem to care what the law said. In the end, the self-appointed spies turned out to be more like bumbling Maxwell Smart. Along with their own internal memos about spying, the fruits of their labor were also accidentally posted on the Internet. It's tens of thousands of pages of emails and pictures of the whistleblower computer screens containing some of the very same information that the FDA bureaucrats were so keen to keep secret. When I started asking questions about this, FDA officials seemed to suffer from a sudden bout of amnesia, collective amnesia. It took them more than 6 months to answer a letter last January, starting my investigation of this issue. When I pushed for a reply during those 6 months, FDA told my staff that the response would take time to make sure it was accurate and complete. When I finally got the response on Friday, it doesn't even answer the simplest of questions, such as who authorized this targeted spying. And isn't it a coincidence? Just Friday, before the New York Times article was going to come out, sometime they finally answered a letter going way back to my questions of January. Worse than that, though, it is misleading in its denials about intentionally intercepting communications with Congress. When I asked them why they couldn't just answer some simple questions, they told my staff that the response was under review by the, quote, appropriate officials in the administration, end of quote. The non-answers and the double-speak would have fit right into some George Orwell novel. Of course, when my staff dug deeper and asked if the response was being reviewed by the Office of Management and Budget, the Food and Drug Administration responded no, it wasn't being reviewed by OMB. FDA refused to identify who within the administration was holding up the FDA's response to my letter. Now, that's in an administration that said on January the 20th, 2009, they're going to be the most transparent in the history of this country. FDA refused to say how long it had been sitting on that person's desk or why it had been approved by the political officials outside the FDA. Who is this shadowy figure conducting some secret review of the FDA's responses to this senator's questions? Why was there all of the sudden interest in exerting political control over the correspondence of this supposedly independent federal agency? And when we use the word independent federal agency around here, we mean not subject to political control. We need answers, and we need answers now. I've been demanding answers for 6 months. For the past 6 months, FDA has been telling me, just be patient. FDA has been telling me that they have a good story to tell, and that's their words, a good story to tell. Apparently, though, there's someone in this administration, President Obama's administration, who didn't want them to say anything for as long as they could possibly get away with not saying anything. I finally got Commissioner Hamburg on the phone in June this year. Commissioner Hamburg personally assured me that the FDA was going to fully cooperate with my investigation. And yet, the FDA has provided me with nothing but misleading and incomplete responses. The FDA has failed to measure up to Commissioner Hamburg's pledge of cooperation. The FDA buried its head in the sand in hopes that I would lose interest and go away. They don't know me very well. And that's not going to happen. I don't care who is in charge of the executive branch, Republican or Democrat. I am going to continue demanding answers. When government bureaucrats obstruct and intercept my communications with protected whistleblowers, I'm not going to stop. When government bureaucrats stonewall for months on end, I will not stop. When government bureaucrats try and muddy the waters and mislead, I will not stop. I intend to get to the bottom of it. I will continue to press the FDA until we know who authorized spying. Can you imagine spying in American government, a transparent government, supposed to be transparent, spying on whistleblowers that are protected by law, that have a special office set up to protect them, and spying on communication between a lawyer and their client? Someone within the FDA specifically authorized spying on private communications with my own office and with several other members of Congress. Someone at FDA specifically authorized spying on private communications with Congressman Van Hollen's office. Someone at FDA specifically authorized spying on private communications with the staff of the Senate Committee Special Committee on Aging. Someone at FDA specifically authorized spying on private communications with the lawyers for whistleblowers. And those lawyers are called the Office of Special Counsel. These whistleblowers thought the FDA was approving drugs and treatment that it shouldn't. These whistleblowers thought the FDA was caving to pressure from the companies who were applying for FDA approval. They have a right to express those concerns without any fear of retaliation whatsoever if the law is going to be followed, the law of protecting whistleblowers. But after doing so, 2 of these whistleblowers were fired. 2 more were forced to leave FDA, and 5 of them were subjected to an intense spying campaign. Senior FDA officials may have broken the law. They authorized the capturing of personal email passwords through keystroke logging software. That potentially allowed them to log in to the whistleblower's personal email accounts and access emails that were never even accessed from a work computer without a subpoena or warrant. That would be a criminal violation. After 6 months, FDA finally denied that occurred. However, that denial was based on the word of one unnamed information technology employee involved in the monitoring. We need a more thorough investigation than that. I have asked the FDA to make that person and several other witnesses available for interviews with my staff. We will see how cooperative FDA plans to be now. I will continue to press the FDA to open every window and every door. Eventually, enough sunlight on this agency will cleanse it. FDA gets paid to protect the public, not to keep us in the dark. Secret monitoring programs, spying on Congress, retaliating against whistleblowers. This is sad commentary on the state of affairs at the FDA. I know that there are hardworking and principal rank-and-file employees at the FDA who care very much about their mission to protect the American public from harm. Unfortunately, all too often, those rank-and-file employees are unfairly tarnished by others, such as those involved in this spy ring. This is a sad commentary on President Obama's promise to the American people that this would be the most transparent administration in history. The American people can't lose faith in the FDA. Unfortunately, after this debacle, some of that faith may deteriorate. FDA has a lot of work to do to restore the public's trust. I yield the floor and suggest the absence of a quorum.
Clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Akaka.